It's now time for us to deal with a very controversial matter. And yesterday, we all heard the letter from the President's office accepting the recommendations of the Article 146 Committee to remove the Lord Chief Justice, Gertrude Torkornu, such that she's no longer Chief Justice. We're going to take just a few minutes of your time to do the historical analysis of all of these things and then tell you what happened, a few things that we know, and just to set the conversation in perspective. I know that this conversation, now that Adom-Otchere by-election is over, has been won by the NDC, this conversation is going to pick up steam again from tomorrow up until the weekend. Is going to be a big conversation for all the weekend stories. So for young people who watch us, we just want to set the perspective for you. How has the presidency dealt with the disagreement with the head of the judiciary? It's important that in all constitutional regimes, and beginning from 1778, when Montesquieu wrote that book entitled The Spirit of the Laws, the issue about separation of powers, independence of the three arms of government, and some people add the fourth being the media, has become very, very paramount. And it's almost like a measure of how a democratic environment is working, whether the legislative arm is independent of the executive and vice versa, and the judiciary and all of that. Because there's always bound to be tension between the heads of these institutions. One wants something done. The executive has his role to implement policy. The legislature has his role to make law. But you will find that in checks and balances, all of them have a way of, legislature has a way of doing policy or shaping policy or changing policy. The judiciary has a way of changing legislation by using, they call it judge-made law. And when there's judge-made law, it means that the legislature, the judiciary, is taking up the role of the legislature by making law. So these are, there are tensions there, and that's what really every constitution and the conduct of the constitutional actors is set out to delimit. Okay, so we look at, well, there was 1960, there was 169, 92, 2001, 2017, 18, 2023. Now we have listed in the history of Ghana where there's been these brushes that have happened between especially between the executive president and the judiciary. The first one occurred in 1963. What date was it again? Do they have the date? The date was 11th December 1963. There had been a bomb thrown on Kwame Nkrumah somewhere in Kulungugu in the upper region, as it was then called. And the people involved were some important people who were arrested. The foreign minister, Adom-Otchere, was arrested. He used to be interior minister. At that time, he was foreign minister. He was arrested. Terry Adamafiu, the information minister, was also arrested. The trial was known as the Terry Adamafiu trial. After the trial, Adom-Otchere and Terry Adamafiu were set free. Others were convicted. His Excellency was not happy with it. So what did he do? He fired Sir Kuffour. Sir Kuffour was the same person who swore Kwame Nkrumah in during his 1960 event, but Sir Kuffour was fired. Nkrumah fired Kuffour for the ruling against the government in the Kulungugu. What happened was Kuffour chaired the panel that said that Terry Adamafiu and Adom-Otchere were not guilty of the offense of premeditated murder against the president. On 11 December 1963, they were summarily dismissed by the president. Then the Constitution at the time was sort of quiet on it. So the president acted by removing Kuffour and then passed legislation. So we write it here. Nkrumah rushed a bill to Parliament through his Attorney General, the Honorable Col Swansea, seeking to gain the powers to fire judges at will. Subsequently, the Parliament passed that law for the Osajefo. So Edward Akufo-Addo was sacked, and also sacked was Kofi Adumoah Bosman and R.S. Blay. They were all fired as Supreme Court justices. So that ended one chapter. So when the Second Republic came, everyone in Ghana and those who wrote the Constitution were eager to stop the president or the leader of the government from being able to remove the Chief Justice. So the 1969 Constitution has no role for the president to remove the Chief Justice. It has no Article 146 process. In fact, the 1969 Constitution went to the other extreme, where the leader of the government, the Prime Minister, can under no circumstance remove a Chief Justice. Nobody can send a petition. That window was completely closed as to whether somebody can send a petition for the removal of the Chief Justice. Given the history that the First Republic came from, the good people of Ghana at the time decided that no, they don't want that. So the only thing that Busia could do when, of course, the brushes always happen, Busia was concerned about a ruling of the Supreme Court. What was it about? Somebody who had been fired. It was thought that they were Nkrumah people, so the Busia people took over, and they were firing some of the important leaders of the Nkrumah people. They gathered 568 people. They call it the Apollo 568, and they were all given letters to go home. They were chief directors. One of them, Mr. Salah, decided to test the matter at the Supreme Court and said that the Prime Minister and the government cannot sack him. In the ruling, which Salah won, the Supreme Court's justices, the case entitled Salah and Attorney General, the Supreme Court ruled by a majority, Philip Archer in the majority, EMP Sowa in the majority, Apalu, three of them for the majority, Justice Srebo and Justice Enin for the minority. They ruled in favor of the applicant that the Prime Minister cannot sack Mr. Salah. Buzia was concerned, but he didn't have the power to sack judges because the system had protected the judges through the provisions of the 1969 Constitution. So what did Buzia say? That's Justice Sowa here, that's Justice Apalu here. And then Buzia said to the general public that no court can enforce any decision that seeks to compel the government to employ or re-employ anyone. That will be a futile exercise, and I wish to make that perfectly clear. 18th April 1970 is when Prime Minister Buzia made the statement. Buzia did not have the power to fire the judges, but perhaps if he did, maybe he would have fired somebody, because these things get to high pitch. But it is important that the system works in a way that stops the politicians who can get emotional about some of these things and stops them quite nicely. So that was the experience over there in the Second Republic. Now, let's come to the 1992 Constitution. Suffice it to say, though, that the 1979 Constitution had a provision like Article 146. I think it was Article 125 or something like that. It's in the 1979 Constitution. You can Google and check. Article 124, they are being corrected. It's Article 124 of the 1979 Constitution had a provision very similar to Article 146 that we have today. It allowed the impeachment process, but it was to be guided very, very carefully and used only sparingly in the extreme situations. But enter 1992, where we have an Article 146 process that could herald the removal of a Supreme Court judge or a Chief Justice. On 31st December in the 31st December decision, which was in 1993 actually, Fly Lieutenant Rawlings was unhappy with the ruling. What happened? The Supreme Court gave a verdict, a very damning one, a 5-4 decision in favor of the NPP, which had gone to court to apply that J.J. Rawlings's military coup d'etat that brought him to power, and which of course ended and heralded the 1992 Constitution, cannot continuously be celebrated under a constitutional dispensation. This was the case that was sent to court by Peter Adjei, may he rest in peace, former Speaker of Parliament, and at that time, a leading member of the NPP. He later became its chairman. Peter Adjei was successful in the court by a 5-4 decision against the Attorney General that Fly Lieutenant Rawlings's beloved day of his most beloved day in his life as a politician, the day of 31st December, which had been celebrated for 11 years as a holiday, can no longer be celebrated as a holiday. J.J. Rawlings did not take kindly to that, and he had something to say. But you know that J.J. Rawlings, under the 1992 Constitution, was also precluded from issuing instructions to remove a Chief Justice or to sack a judge. Otherwise, perhaps, he would have sacked Justice N.Y.B. Adade, who marshaled the majority opinion, and we know the story behind that. If you read my book, there's a big story behind that, what happened. We'll get the book for you very soon. Justice Adade would have been fired by Mr. Rawlings if indeed Mr. Rawlings had the power to do so. But the 1992 Constitution did not allow the president to do so, except by an Article 146 process. Mr. Rawlings was not interested in pursuing an Article 146 process. Nobody sent a petition, and so Adade was not sacked, but JJ was very upset about it. Now, this is the majority in the ruling. Adade led the majority opinion. GRM Francois was there, Justice Adom-Otchere, Justice Akins, and Justice Efron Benjamin, who actually turned the day in favor of the majority opinion on that day. The dissenting opinion was from the Chief Justice Philip Archer, Justice Aban, later a Chief Justice, Justice Joyce Bamford-Addo, later a Speaker of Parliament, and Justice Ampere, may he rest in peace. They were the dissenting opinion in the famous matter of 31st. So that now we are in the Fourth Republic. Let's move to more interesting ones. In 2001 and 2002, there was another matter. John Agyekum Kuffour had just become president. The NPP had campaigned in the 2000 election on corruption, as all opposition parties these days do, isn't it? So they had campaigned on corruption, and it was now said that the courts were slow. You know, the way the courts handled the matters, the base of the NPP were not happy with the Kuffour administration, and so Justice Redu, who was the Chief Justice at the time, came up with a policy that they should have fast-track high courts, where systems will move faster than in the regular courts, and this is where all the criminal prosecution will begin. Mr. Chikata, who was at that time being prosecuted for causing financial loss to the state through his lawyer, Professor Evio Dankwa, challenged the status of the fast-track high court, whether or not they were properly, they had been properly assembled as courts, because there are processes by which courts are assembled by the Lord Chief Justice. The matter went to court, and with a 5-4 majority, the Supreme Court held that the fast-track high courts were not properly set up. John Agyekum Kuffour was quite upset with the situation, and this was a big decision against the MPP. But here again, the 1992 Constitution does not allow the president to remove any Chief Justice or to sack any Chief Justice, except through an Article 146 process. So Kuffour's only window was to go for a review of the matter, which is allowed by the Constitution. In the circumstances at that time, there were 10 Supreme Court judges only. Justice Redu had instituted a practice direction where all judges will sit when the matter is being heard, and therefore just one judge, there were 11 Supreme Court judges, one judge was not available. His name is Lamte. He was not available to sit, and so the 9 sat. So Justice Lamte came back, and it will be 10 because an even number. Justice Afre was appointed from the Court of Appeal to the Supreme Court to give the number 11. On the review, the decision was overturned and the fast-track high court survived.